While we're getting ready, we are on page 151. 151, I believe. Chapter 6, verse. Chapter 14. Yeah, chapter 14 in the document office. I probably asked for water. I guess I must have left. No.
Thank you for volunteering.
Shall we pray? Oh, gracious Father, we just thank you again for this opportunity, oh Lord God, to stand before your holy and righteous people, to teach your word, oh Father. I ask now for your Holy Spirit illumination and its guidance, oh Father. We thank you so much, oh Father God, for those who are here, and even for those who may be on their way as well, oh Father. We pray, Father God, for all the doors who stand open on this day to proclaim your holy word, both by teaching and by preaching. We pray for our pastor and his wife, oh Father. We pray for all those who are sick in this body called Shiloh, Father. We ask for continued healing on my wife as well, and all the other members in Shiloh, Father God, that are recuperating from various operations as well. We ask all these blessings, oh Father, in your Son Jesus Christ's name. Amen. So, I was told that you all are on verse number 9. Page 151 and 150. I'm sorry, which is on page 151 in Dr. MacArthur's book. So again, as we said before, one of the most difficult passages in probably the whole New Testament is chapter 6 of Hebrews, verses 4 through 6, which you all have already covered, so I don't have to worry about that. But then you have chapter 7, not chapter 7, but verse 6. Back up. Then you have chapter 6, verse 7 and 8, then of course you have 9 through 12. That's the breakdown that we're looking at so far. Remember what I told you before, that you gotta look at Hebrews always as this chain, so to speak, and you gotta keep these links linked up. Because if you get the links out of sequence, or if you don't link them up properly, you're going to come to a wrong conclusion. So therefore, this is especially important when you get to verses 4 and 6, because the question always comes up, is he talking to believers, is he talking to unbelievers, who in the world is he talking to? So if we keep our thought process in line, in other words, if we keep the chains linked, then we will understand and have a better way of knowing how to properly understand these key passages of Scripture. So we said before that what? That verses 1 and 3 is talking to believers. We already know that, right? Mm-hmm. And then you already discussed that verses 4 through 6. 4 through 6, he has unbelievers in mind. B-E-L-I-E-V-E-R. Right? So, you all have heard of what is called a master link, right? In a chain. The link that kind of like, they link together. So, you want to kind of like see verses 4 through 6 as kind of like a master link. And what I mean by that is that what it does is it links these other verses up so that you don't kind of get off track. In other words, you don't forget who he's talking to. Therefore, when you come to 7 and 8 now, you can see now that 7 and 8 is actually linked to verses 4 through 6. In particular, is linked to verses 4 and 5. So, what you have here is you have believers here, right? And what is the writer trying to do now? What is his ultimate purpose in this chapter? What is he doing? In other words, why is it important that you understand how this would fit? This master link, so to speak. Why is that important to you? It's important because what? Because the writer is trying to do what? He's trying to get them back on the road where they can be, where their assurance of salvation can be maintained. Because right now they're tolerant on the fact of going back to what? Judaism. So therefore, what does he do for us? Every now and then he gives us what? A warning passage. Right? In other words, here he's saying what? You got to leave the old, right? And in other words, if you're going to progress on, you got to leave the old. And you got to go to the new. So therefore, he did all that here. And now he's saying that I need to motivate you. In other words, I need to motivate you so that what I said in verses 1 and 2 will in essence do what? Will stay with you, and at the same time motivate you to do what? To move, because he's saying, because remember now what he's saying in verses 4 and 5. And of course, in Moses 12, verse 6, where he's saying that it is impossible once you reject Christ, it is impossible to come back. Not just for me as a believer trying to talk to you, but even God will not bring you back anymore. So you can see now that the strong argument here is designed to do what? Not to discourage, but to again do what? Further motivate them on to what? To go on. Remember now, he's already done this one time before in chapter 3. Remember? When he told them that because of unbelief, the desert was what? Was strewn with the bodies of all your forefathers. So again, designed to do what? Designed again to do what? To motivate them that if you want to inherit the promise, the Sabbath, if you will, Canaan, if you will, then you can't be like your forefathers and what? And you have a lot of unbelief. So again, he's what? He's constantly giving them these warning passages to what? To again push them on. Because we all sometimes need to do that. In other words, sometimes we need to have these warning passages in our own lives in order to make sure that we don't falter and go back to our old life. Again, remember now, these are believers. So what he's saying here is, although I understand that you can't do that, in other words, you're not going to crucify Christ all over again and bring him to open shame. I know you're not going to do that, but I need to do what? I need to warn you that there is the what? There is the potential for you to fall back into your old life. Again, I don't know. I want to be careful. Again, not that you will, because remember now, once saved, what? Always saved. So again, it's a warning passage designed to, in essence, motivate these believers because they had already gone so far off the road, off the track, so to speak. Remember now that all these chains are designed to get you to this one chain right there. Okay? In other words, faith is the evidence. So all this right here, all this, oh, I'm trying to protect myself, but this ain't working too well. So all this, right? All this, 1 all the way down to 10, he's doing what? He's giving you what? All the facts. He's giving you, in essence, what? The evidence. In essence, he's doing what now? He's laying what? The foundation. Okay? He's laying them. In other words, once you get to the end of chapter 10, he can now begin to talk about what? Faith. This is what, in other words, all I've been trying to get you to do is to first of all understand what faith is. How do you strengthen your faith? Well, you got to have the facts. So I'm going to give you all the facts that you need. I'm going to lay it down for you So that by the time we get to the actual topic, you will in essence understand, and at the same time, your belief now has been strengthened. Why? Because I've given you this additional information that perhaps you might have known, but you might have forgotten, whatever the case might be. But I have now given you that so that now you will have what? This firm foundation. So now he does that in chapter 6, verses 4 through 6. Now when he gets to verse 7 and 8, notice now, he gives them the teachings here. Follow me now. This is the teaching. This is the warning. And now what he does is, in verses 7 and 8, he now gives them an application. In other words, okay, I've told you about what happened to those who fall away. He use all these strong words. Those who have fallen away, if you fall away, what have you, if you crucify Christ again and what have you. So now in verse 7 and 8, what he does is, which is pretty amazing, what he does in verses 7 and 8 is what? He gives what? A parable. Of all things, he lays out a parable in 7 and 8 by explaining now what happens. The parable is designed to do what? Is to show the results of group 1, right? And of group 2. What's the parable? What is the parable that he gives?
He's talking about the rain and the water and how the fruit is born from the earth. There's weeds that go around, the weeds and the thistles that grows, and you have to cut them away to keep them from ruining the other part of them.
What? Is that what he said?
Well,
I mean, you are on the right track, obviously, but while your students leave you in the table to live, so to speak. But
We let him talk today.
well, it's a class.
Well, I mean, yeah, like she was saying, the fruit is there, but
But
you
if
got,
you don't bear fruit, then it's gonna be destroyed.
Right. So how do you tie that into what we just said about the two groups?
the fruit is in it. They're intermingled with the believers.
Right. In other words,
Trying to get them, the unbelievers on track.
right. So he's
Basically, you can't crucify Christ twice.
well, yeah. That's what he said in verse 6. So this is how we tie it together. He's saying what? There is only what? One field here. What's the field he's talking about, by the way? What field is he talking about?
Tares.
No. Remember this? But the ground. Who is he talking to? Who is he talking to? His people. Say what?
Hebrews.
Who are they? The Jews. So the field, he's talking about one field, because remember now, verses 4 and 6 is a warning in regards to verses 1, 2, and 3. So he's talking about what? There is one field in view here, and that's the Jews. Okay? So he's saying now, in this field, you got all these, you got this crop. So the commonality is what? The commonality is the one field. On this one field, you have two kinds of crops growing.
Right.
On one side, you have he call them herbs and what have you. They're growing like crazy over here. And then of course on this other side, you got the briars and the thistles. Right?
Weeds.
What's the
Not so
commonality?
much the weeds, but I mean, I'm from the south.
Weeds.
And they had to, well, there are briars.
Right.
That come up around the crop.
Right.
And they usually have to cut it away or burn it away, because if they don't burn it away, or cut it away, then it ruins it grows, the seed fall into the earth.
Right.
And it makes more thistles and.
Now, what's wrong with that parable here? You talked about the parable of wheat and tares, right? When Jesus said, "Don't try."
I'm talking about a country girl.
And I understand because you're talking to a country boy, so I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. Okay, what's the point here? The point is what? The point is that when we interpret the Bible, we cannot mix things together. Okay? But in this case, in other words, in this case,
It was something life out of whatever you're trying to grow that's good.
right. And
If it's mixed.
what did the Lord say about that? By the way? Don't you what? Don't you try to do that.
Right.
Because go together.
Right.
So he's talking now about the church or the kingdom of God, really. That's not the picture here so much. Okay? Because remember now, and again, we want to keep these chains together, right? So here his concern is what? He wants to explain. In other words, he wants to extract now the principle or the spiritual truth that he just taught you in verses 1 through 6. Okay? So whatever this field is, okay, in other words, whatever this field is has got to be restricted. Okay, follow me? It's got to be restricted to just those verses. You can't go back here. In other words, you can't go back here to Christ's teaching of the wheat and tare, right? Because that's not the teaching there. The teaching here is that the writer want these readers to understand what? That among you, in other words, among you that I'm talking to right now, there exists two groups of people. One is unbelievers, one is believers. Again, similar to the wheat and tares. But his goal here is what? His goal is to show that the commonality here is that what? Is that rain is falling, okay, on everybody. No matter what side of the field you're on, the rain is falling on each one of those groups. So now the question becomes, what is the rain? To say what? The word. In other words, he's saying that both groups have heard the gospel. Both groups have understood who Christ is. Both groups have understood that the prophecy that evolves around Christ for coming as the Messiah, etc., etc., etc. Both groups have what? They have heard that. The problem is that one group has heard the gospel, and now they are able to do what? To produce what? To produce herbs. In other words, garden, food, and fruit. In other words, fruit that is what? Beneficial. Fruit that is designed to do what? To grow their faith. On the other side of the field, they heard the same message, and now he has in view what? Those folks that he talked about in verses 4 through 6. Here he has in view the folks that he talked about in verses 1, 2, and 3. So he says what? On this side of the fence, although they heard, follow me now, they heard the gospel, but what did they do with it?
Ignored it.
No, not just ignored it. Remember now, we're talking about verses 4 through 6. What does verse 6 say? Chapter 6, verse 4.
They fallen away.
Yeah, in other words, and the idea about falling away is what? Is that they have what? Totally rejected the message. As a matter of fact, they have in essence called Christ a fraud. So on the one hand, they received it, and as a result, because remember now, to receive the word means that it has internalized itself within. As a matter of fact, the word that the writer uses in verses 7 is the word that's used of a woman who has conceived a child.
Yes, I did that one the last week.
Okay.
Johnson. I didn't associate it with the earth as a woman having a
What's the
baby.
point, by the way?
I forgot.
Once they come here, they're separated.
Why do you use a word that would emphasize a woman conceiving a child? What's his point? His point is what? You've internalized it. Follow me now. You've internalized it, and the natural principle is what? What's the natural principle? Once a woman conceives a child, what's the principle?
You birthed
You birthed it.
something.
So it's a natural progression. In other words, when it rains, because remember now, the rain comes from where? From heaven. From God, right? So God gives the word. So when God gives the word and conception is done, what is the expected growth? Good fruit, right?
Do something good.
To do something good, right? So he doesn't expect anything less over here. But the result is that, in other words, the field did not yield that which was good based upon what was. In other words, go to Isaiah 5 real quick. Yes, Brother Jones. Oh, I thought you had a question. Go to Isaiah 5. Well, let's start reading that first. Are you there? Are you there?
I'll keep going this with my glasses.
Boy, read.
Now let me sing to my well-beloved, a song of my beloved regarding his vineyard. My well-beloved has a vineyard on a very fruitful hill. Dug it up and cleared out its stones and planted it with choicest vine. Built a tower in its midst and also made a winepress in it. So he expected it to bring forth good grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes. Now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and of Judah, judge please between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done to my vineyard that I have not done it? Why then, when I expected it to bring forth good grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes? And now please let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it shall be burned, break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down.
Okay, we can stop right there. Okay, you see the point now, right? He's writing to what? His people. His people. In other words, he could not have given this parable to a Gentile because it wouldn't really click in their head in relation to what he's trying to say from verses 1 through 6. So now when he says that, so now when he gives the end of the parable and he talks about the briars and the thistles, you now understand why it's going to what? Destruction. Why? Because God has given the field all that it needed. He gave it good rain, good soil, everything. And what did it do? Instead of producing good fruit, it produced what? Bad fruit. So what can God now do with that field? It's of no use to him. And that's why the writer has already said, and that's the point that explains his response in verse 6 when he said that it is what? It is impossible now for you to be renewed. Okay, so you can see now how the parable now helps us understand what he has been saying in verses 1 through 6. So that having said all that now, okay, he now moves into verse 7. I'm sorry, verse 9. Okay, from which is where you are left off. I didn't mean to go out around the world, but I can't. When I teach, I got to connect things together, because otherwise I can't take over. Yes.
Okay.
But I'm kind of confused because Jesus taught the and I thought Paul was assigned to the Gentiles.
Right? So what's the question?
Why would there be a difference between pairs? They should have heard what Jesus was speaking.
Okay, good question. Again, let me ask you the question. Who is this writer talking to? Hebrews, Jews, right? These are what? Same Jews that he's talking to. Why is he writing to them?
Because they're falling.
back.
Yeah.
In other words, he don't want to fall back. He wants to strengthen their faith. Who was Jesus talking to? Was he? Or was he talking? Well, he was talking to the Jews, obviously. But what was his point? When Jesus was given this is in chapter 13, by the way, Matthew chapter 13. What was Jesus' point behind the parables in Matthew 13? What was his point? What? Yes, he was talking to the Jews. Well, he was talking to the whole. Yes, you're right. In other words, you're talking to religious leaders. But for the most part, what was his point? His point was what? He wanted to explain to the people that what? This is what the kingdom of heaven is. Okay, in other words, it consists of what? It consists of wheat and tares. Okay? That's not what's going on here. This letter was written specifically to who? To the Hebrew church. With a what? With a specific purpose designed with a specific purpose in view, which is to what? I want to strengthen your faith. So therefore, I'm only going to what? I'm only going to focus upon those things which pertains to that goal. So yes, wheat and tares, good parable. But that's not what he's doing here. So we can't really use that here because remember now, in the wheat and tare parables, these are what? You have the one field and what? You don't have two different sides.
Right, they all
They all mixed it together. So again, as I said before, when we read the Bible, we must always read the Bible in what? In context. And the only way we can do that is what? Is to first identify why the writer is writing the book in the first place. Because once you do that, then you're on your way. And that's why I said before, keep these what? Keep these chains linked together. Because as long as you do that, you will always come to the right conclusion. So now he's giving them the parable to explain the lesson. Okay? That's the question. Okay. So,
embedded in the minister's comments, though, it sounded like he was saying, if you mentioned Paul, right? Is that what? So what you're? I guess I'm making this up, but it sounds like you're saying that Paul wrote Hebrews, and that he's.
No. I was saying that Paul was sent to Gentiles.
So I guess
is us.
Right, but I guess that's what's throwing me off. How does that?
Paul came in.
Yeah.
Oh, because when we started talking, we were talking about Jesus only preached to the Hebrews. I say, well, Paul preached to Christians, to the Gentiles. So where is the distinction between Jesus was saying and Paul was saying?
You mean here, just in Hebrews?
No, overall.
Oh, okay.
Here's the difference. And let me ask that last part of the question. Here's the difference. The difference is that, and I heard what you heard. That's what I didn't want to deal with. The difference is that Paul is talking to the Gentiles in general. That's his ministry. Now, many people believe that Paul wrote Hebrews. He probably did, but we don't want to go down that road because that's not the point. The point is that the writer was definitely Hebrew.
Right.
He was definitely well learned in Judaism, and he was definitely well learned in the law. So therefore, it could have been Paul. But the reality is that Paul's commission was to the Gentiles. In this case, whoever the writer is, his specific mission is to the Hebrew people. Okay? So now we move into verse 9. Again, on page 151. I know you guys have read that. So, by the way, please pick up one of the expositors when you leave. So now in verse 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, the writer is doing something now different. Okay? Let's review the chain. All right, are we ready? First, he addressed the Christians 1, 2, and 3. 4, 5, 6, he does what? He gives a warning. 7 and 8, he does what? He gives a parable to explain a warning. And of course, his exhortation in verses 1, 2, and 3. But now you can imagine now, if you're sitting in the audience, in other words, you in the congregation, or you in the Sunday school class, and you've heard all this, especially the warning and everything, you now want to what? you want to hear some what? Some good news. In other words, at this point in time, the writer feels and he understands now that he has given the people what? Some heavy, heavy teaching here, especially in verses 4 through 6. So now he wants to what? He wants to ease down. In other words, he wants to bring some kind of calmness and reassurance back to the believers. Okay, we got that? So that's what verses 9 and 10 is. Verses 9 and 10 is designed to do, for the most part, 9 through 12. It's first to do what? To express. In other words, Paul wants to first of all do what? Express his goodwill. In other words, Paul not Paul is, you got me saying Paul, right? But the writer now wants to kind of reassure the believers that I understand that you don't fall into the category of verses 4 through 6. Okay, so now he wants to express what? His goodwill towards these people, that I do understand and I do believe, by the way, that you what? You are definitely saved. So although I said some hard things, it does not apply to you. Okay, that's his first purpose or goal in these verses 9 through 12. And then secondly, what he does is he declares his judgment concerning their state. In other words, because of who you are, in other words, because you are Christians, this is how I see you. This is how God sees you. He does all these things again in verses 9 through 12. And then finally, his third goal is he wants to give the grounds upon which his judgment was based. In other words, he explains to them, okay, I have goodwill towards you. I believe you're saved. And then he does what? He then gives them evidence, really. I use the word judgment, but what he's doing is really, he's giving them evidence of why he believes that they are saved in these verses as well. So we all clear there. So as we go into these verses 9 through 12, we understand what he's saying. And again, this is and let me just read this quote from, I hate reading something. Let me read this quote from, I put my hand in my pocket, I've got my glasses in my pocket, chalkboard all over the place. Let me read you this quote from John, from one of the writers that I was reading. Now follow me. The general meaning of this paragraph, again, this paragraph is referring to verses 9 through 12. All the parts of which are closely connected together. Plainly is, now hear this. The reason why I have made these awful statements about apostates, because those who fall away, is not because I consider you whom I am addressing as apostates, for your conduct proves that this is not your character. And the promise of God secures that this doom shall not be yours, but that you may be stirred up to persevering steadiness in the faith and hope and obedience of the truth by a constant continuance in which alone you can, like those who have gone before you, obtain in all their perfections promised blessings of the Christian salvation. So that kind of like summarized why he's writing these last verses. Now, so let's go to our Bibles, verses 9, and we're going to read statement by statement, so we can get an idea of how this brother. In other words, now you're going to see what you're going to now see the true heart of this brother. Again, not that you've not seen it already, because remember now, verses 4 through 6, Paul is not Paul. See, you got to be saying that now. I can't get it out of my head. But in these, because remember now, in verses 4 through 6, he said some hard things, but these were necessary. The point being what? If you love your brothers or your sister, you see them going down the wrong road, sometimes you gotta what? Say some what? Hard things. If you what? If you love them. So out of love. So that's his point here. his point is, I had to say these things, but now that I've said them, now I can do what? I can now reassure you of your salvation. Because by this time, I'm quite sure that many of you was probably, am I really saved? I mean, so those kind of things. So now he goes into this. So now let's look at verse 9. Who has that real quickly? Chapter 6, verse 9 says,
But beloved,
stop right there. So right away now, you can already see now, when he uses this word here, okay? You can already see now he's already doing what now? He's what? He's taking the link. Remember the link. Don't forget about the link. Okay? He's now again what? He's linking. He's linking now. The word but shows that he's talking about something that he already said. So your goal is what? To identify now what is the but. So he says now but, and then he says this word beloved. Okay? So now you find out that he's not just linking this thing to verses 4 through 6, but now he's taking it back all the way to what?
chapter 1.
Chapter 1 of what? Not quite. He's taking it all the way back to. Go there real quickly. Chapter 3, verse 1. What does it say?
Therefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest in our confession, Christ Jesus.
Okay, so in essence, what he's doing is what? What's he doing? What's he doing here?
Identifying them.
He's what?
Identifying
He's
them.
identifying. In other words, he's already said that they are apostates in this field. But now the first thing that he does as part of his assurance is what? Is to let them know that I believe that you are what? That you are part of the body of Christ. So he addressed them as beloved. Now this word beloved, I think Dr. Mac, this is on page 150 of Dr. MacArthur. If you have that, read that paragraph. I think the second paragraph. Read that.
Term beloved.
Yes.
Agapetos or agape.
Agapeo. It's from the word agape. Agapeo. Agapeo.
He just says agape.
Well, okay, go ahead.
Expresses the highest kind of relationship. It is used 60 times in the New Testament. First 9 times it is used by God the Father to speak of Christ as beloved Son. Everywhere else, whether referring to Jews or Gentiles, is
Okay, so you see that he uses what now? In other words, he intentionally picks out a word, a Greek word. As a matter of fact, the word that's used here, the root word is of course agape, but the actual word that he uses here means the divine loved ones. Again, emphasizing that I'm not talking to, in other words, I'm not talking to this side of the field. I'm talking to the divinely loved.
So the believer.
Exactly right. The word itself does what? The word itself reassures you now that he's again talking to those of us who are what? Who are saved. And again, the important part I wanted to read in Dr. MacArthur's book is that this is this word, the word itself has to do with what? Relationship. And it's the one word that God uses, God the Father uses when he's referring to his beloved Son. So again, you can see now why you would never use this word when you're talking to what? Unbelief. In other words, the writer understands, his audience understands that the very word itself sets them apart now from those who are not saved. And therefore, that now give them, in other words, it would be a sign of relief. Okay, thank you, writer, for now putting us back into a shirt. Oh, let me help.
You know, what's interesting,
Let's see y'all get the glasses out, scratch something.
what's interesting is that,
Thank you.
I'm trying to be a gentleman. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
the rest of that paragraph.
Yeah.
What Pink says, not because she didn't name it. I like what he said.
Read it.
Your hand up.
You know, it's in the book.
It's in the book.
Yeah, so, but the other piece of what the minister read is, Arthur Pink observes, I cannot really love a brother with the gospel love, which is required of me, unless I have a well-grounded persuasion that he is the brother.
Why do you like that?
I just thought it was interesting because I think it just
Sounds good.
it perpetuates what you just said. And basically, when I call the fact that I'm calling you brother signifies that I believe that you are well grounded in the Lord's word. That's
Well, okay, this is why that's important. Okay, follow me now. This is why this is important. I'm glad you brought it up. In your family, do you love your physical blood brother, and you feel you could do against sister, whatever? How comfortable do you feel going to that brother or that sister and say, you know what, Calvin, what you did was not right? With confidence now. You can do that. Why? Because what? We say what? We're family. And because we're family, we what? We love each other, follow this now, in a way that we don't love our friend. That's why that's important. Paul is, the writer is saying what? That the one thing that as Christians that we should always be able to do to one another is what? Is to go to each other and confront them in love. Why? Because that's what love does. As a matter of fact, that's what draws what? That's what draws families together tightly is what? Is that what? Love for one another. What does Jesus say in John 3? He said what? By this shall all men know that you are my disciples. By what? Your love one for the other. Okay? So you can see now that the writer now is being very intentional about the words that he's using. Because why? Because he wants to emphasize again, and he wants to reassure the believers that he's talking to that they are indeed part of a family.
So I got a question.
Uh-huh.
So when you say a well-grounded persuasion that the brother or sister, whatever, that they're Christian, I just want to get that.
So what now?
Because you can have a family member and they're not a Christian, so.
I'm using this as, I use a family as an analogy.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's
Only because,
what we are. I'm like,
no. Only because when you're teaching spiritual truths, as fast as I was reminded, you got to try to find some kind of physical.
I
Okay.
got you.
Okay. So that's the reason why I said. Okay. Good. So let's move on. So it says there. What's the rest say? One, but beloved, what?
Beloved son.
But beloved, we are
what?
we're nine, right?
Yeah. We are confident.
Oh,
Verse
I
verse 9.
was in the book.
Oh, sorry. Verse 9.
But beloved, we are confident.
Stop right there. Now, some of your Bibles don't use the word confident. I mean, use the word what?
Well, I'm in the King James.
King James use what? Persuade?
Persuade.
But most modern versions use they use the word confident. Now, what do you suppose is the difference here?
I have faith.
So the word confident means, in other words, what does that word carry behind?
To me, it carries that, I believe in you
Because of,
because of your faith.
because of.
That's me.
I believe that Sister Adams is one of the best biblical teachers that I've ever been under. What do I base it on? On what she's taught and what I've sat on her. In other words, the idea about confidence and persuasion is you gotta have what? Some kind of what? Some kind of evidence. In other words, I can't be confident in anybody
If they haven't done
if they
it.
haven't done it, or at least if I don't know about it. I mean, you can tell me anything. I don't know. In other words, to each one of us, we all have our ideas about who we can be what? Confident in. And therefore we can be persuaded. But all that's based upon something.
I'm persuaded that John Collins knows what he's talking about.
Well, I didn't say that.
I am.
Okay, well, I tried to.
My Bible says we feel sure. We feel sure.
What's the translation?
The ESV.
Okay, yes. So is there a difference? I feel sure, I'm persuaded, I'm
Right,
confident.
that's just the words that they use.
But and again, that's even a better word because now, how can I feel sure about anything?
That you have to know the person or heard something that.
Something. In other words, nobody goes in an airplane and say, "Well, wow." I think looks good to me. Let's go.
Yeah, right.
You go on it because hey, I've seen thousands of people fly on this thing, and therefore I know that hopefully I can get back. But you gotta have what? You gotta have facts. You gotta have some kind of what? Foundation. Because remember now, what is the writer doing? Ultimately, what is he doing? He's what? He's laying a foundation now for these people so that by the time his chain is done, it has linked to faith. And there is no doubt in your mind or the minds of these hearers, wow, yes, I understand now faith is the evidence. In other words, it's based upon a foundation, it's based upon evidence. So you can see now how he's carefully choosing his words. Because he wants to what now? He wants to what? Keep what? Uplifting these people. He wants to keep them linked to his foundational truths. So in essence, we said that he's basing this upon evidence, right? So now I'm surprised you didn't ask the question, but anyway, I asked it for you. Remember now, we're talking about the writer's confidence in these believers. Now, you already know now that in verses 5, was that confidence there?
No,
Say what?
it was confidence they didn't know.
He was stressing it to the
Because they were what? They were like immature. They were immature.
They were babes, they were on the milk.
Yeah, in other words, they were babes in Christ and so forth and so on. Remember now, that's now. This is now. So he said, so he's talking to the same people. And we just said now that in order to have confidence in somebody, you got to have evidence. Well, what kind of evidence is that? However, go now to Hebrews chapter 10. And someone read verses 32 to 32 to 34, or 35. Who has that? Read it. Time is going. Who has it? Who has it? Read it, James.
Verse 32.
I'm sorry, G.
But recall the former days in which, after you were illuminated, you endured a great struggle with suffering, partly while you were made spectacles, both by reproaches and tribulation, partly while you became companions of those who were so treated. For you had compassion on me in my chains, and joyfully accepted the plundering of your goods, knowing that you have a better and an enduring possession for yourselves in heaven.
You can stop there. You see that? Again, what both me and Minister Johnson want you to do is, when you read the Bible, you want to always ask questions. Because if you don't ask questions, you don't come to the right conclusion. So therefore, this writer was what? He has been persuaded, he is confident, not based upon who they, and this is an important lesson for us. We should be careful how we judge people at the moment. Because see, the moment may not reflect your faith as a whole. So the writer says, in the former days, you were not here. The only reason why you're here now is what? Is because of what? Persecution now has come very strongly against you. So in essence now, it has what? It has shaken your faith. But before, in other words, I didn't just know about you before, but I had personal experiences with you. You showed me your compassion. You visited me when I was in prison. Okay? So you see now that the confidence is based upon not now at their weakest point. Because see what happens is, what is everybody trying to do now? He's what? He's trying to now what? Get them back. That's what he's trying to do right now. He's trying to what? He's trying to restore them back to where they once were. So I am confident that although you are here, I know that you will what? Eventually get back to where you were in your former days.
That's why verse 35 says, therefore do not go away from something
That's it. I forgot to have it.
which has great reward.
Thank you for doing that. I stopped.
Stop.
Before you finished that. So forgive me on that one, James. Got carried away. But thank you. So we clear there on that particular issue.
One thought I got out of reading, I could be wrong, but I thought that another reason why he was so strong on teaching the believers, keeping them strong, so they would also be examples for the non-believers, even though.
And that's so
beautiful to that Judaism.
Right.
But that he thought there might be a chance that they would see their life as a Christian Jew and want to.
Excellent.
That's what we're trying to do.
And that's what is that not what we're trying to do as well on a daily basis?
Yeah.
We're trying to show those around us. In other words, those on the other, although those on the other side of the field, we can't. They're beyond reach. But those who are around us, as they see us encounter difficulties and see how we deal with those things, then that should, at the very least, cause them to ask the question, why? Is that possible? And then, of course, now we have what? A door now has been opened to evangelize. So you see, All these are important. And I also emphasize that we need to participate, because nobody has all the answers, but each one the Holy Spirit gives an answer to, as He will and as He chooses. Very good, thank you. See, don't keep it in. So, okay, so the next part of verse 9, Minister Ward, read that, the next sentence, not the whole thing.
Yes, things that accompany salvation, we speak in this matter.
Okay, so on page 152 now, Dr. MacArthur points out some things, because the word accompany, well, what does that word mean, by the way? Well, what does that word accompany mean? Did you look it up? What?
Comes with
Come with.
part of
Come along. What is your study guide aid say that, Brother Jones? What's the specific meaning of this word accompany? Remember now, we're thinking what now in what? In English. Don't think in English. Okay? What does it say?
Well, the Greek word is echo.
Yes. What does it
It
mean?
has a lot. It talks about including. Says it's a primary verb to hold. There's a lot of stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Begin to amend, can, receive, count, and it talks about rest, return, sick, take. That's why I'm confused with all this.
Yeah, because he put Isaiah Strong. Yeah, I would like to have a prize. But anyway, the word, to summarize what the word literally means in Greek, it means what? It means to co-join. Okay? So, what's his point? His point is what? Is that if you are saved, go to page 152 of Dr. McAllister's book.
152.
Yes. If you are saved, now follow me now. If you are saved, they are what? They are certain things that are what? That are co-joined. Now get this. They are co-joined by what? By necessity. In other words, if you are truly saved, you have got to have some kind of evidence that will support who you say you are. Now, in Dr. McAllister's book on page 152, and I think, who's there, by the way?
What do you want us to do?
I want you to read, when I put my glasses on, I want you to read
It says for
where am I now? On the wrong page, what am I? Yeah, the third, 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph. The last paragraph that says accompaniments of salvation. Someone read, who has that real quickly? Who can read that quickly?
The accompaniments of salvation are primarily positive, not negative.
Okay. Keep going.
They do not reflect external ceremonial religion, but internal intervention, transformation. The significance comes not from repeated sacrifices, but from one perfect and complete sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
Okay, so what's his point? His point is this. When you see a flame, okay, when you see a flame, what of necessity must accompany that?
A flame?
A flame, F-L-A-M-E, a fire.
Don't get away from it, put it out.
No, but what of necessity,
Oxygen.
that's what makes it, but what, huh?
It's water.
It's water, but, okay, in other words, say what? Heat, in other words, you can't have fire without heat. In other words, if you have fire, you're gonna have some kind of heat. Now, yes, we understand that there are fake fires that don't have heat, but we're talking now about real fire. You have real fire. Of necessity, you gotta have heat is gonna be present. So that's what the writer is saying. The writer is saying what? That when you are saved, there are certain things that must go along with that. We used the passage before in verses 11 through 14. So he's saying now that these are all things that are what? Are what? External. What he's saying now is that salvation, because it's what? It comes from inside out. The only way that we can know you are saved is, and of course Jesus says what? That you should know the tree by what? It's true. In other words, if you are a real live another redundancy, born again Christian, which is, if you're a Christian, you got to be born. But anyway, if you are a Christian, because of who you are, in other words, of necessity of who you say you are, the tree has got to bear what? It's got to bear fruit. Now again, remember now, the tree is bearing fruit, but it only bears fruit based upon the root. So the writer's point is that since this has already taken place from inside, then that means that because of that one fact, because of that principle, then whatever the fruits are, okay, whatever the fruits are has got to what? They've got to manifest whatever that root is. So if you are saved, those things which accompany salvation are what? Holiness, fellowship, love. You understand that? Okay? As a matter of fact, it's Galatians 5. Because what? If the Holy Spirit lives in us, it has to come in. In other words, I think in one of my, on one sermon I did, I used the example of an orange, and I asked the question, is the orange juice? No, it ain't. You gotta what? You gotta squeeze the orange in order to get the juice. Well, likewise, if we are saved,
You shouldn't have to squeeze it out of us.
Because it's what?
That's natural.
because it's what? Natural. Because what's the principle? What? If I'm an apple tree, it's natural for me to produce what? An apple. If I produce an orange, that means that what?
You're not an apple tree.
You say you are,
Right, but you're not.
but you're not. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, what's he saying? He's saying that salvation is what? Is always, it's always in and out. Our problem is that we think salvation is what? Is out in. They don't work that way. In other words, we are more concerned about what we see people doing on the outside. Or let me put it another way. We're so concerned about outward activities, again, 5:11 through 14, programs and all those other things that have absolutely nothing to do with salvation. Because again, what do we keep in the back of our mind now, based on this lesson? There is one field, but there are two people in that field. They both are receiving the same sermons, the same Sunday school lessons, but the reality is how are they applying what they're learning and what they're hearing? They're only doing it what? One or two ways. Either they are what? They are taking it in, and that word is what now? It is now conceiving or bringing forth and bringing forth what? Truth. Otherwise, it's like the other side of the field. The rain is falling. In other words, the word is going to go out the same way as rain will fall from God. But now, if you don't accept that word into your heart, then it can't do what God intended. Okay, it's now, I think, 9:05, I think. It's now what?
908.
So we don't have time to go into next part of that verse. But please read Dr. MacArthur's book as we continue to study this unbelievable passage of scripture that relates to and back to Brother Arthur Jones' words, comments about that quote from Dr. MacArthur. I mean, Arthur Fink. I actually wrote that down, but now I can't find it. Because, let me just share this with you while we're getting ready to close down. When you see these quotes, I would encourage you to go and find them. The whole quote, because the whole quote is pretty amazing. It's even more amazing.
That's what I would do. To me, it's like he's judging.
Yeah, what?
It's like he's judging. I understand.
Who's judging the person? The what?
I respect.
Well, and that's what I wanted to find out, because that's not the whole quote. That's just like half of the quote. So it's very difficult to understand a quote from a writer if all you get is like a snippet. So and that's why that's why I said I encourage you, when you see these quotes, to go to the actual quote itself, so that you will understand why the writer would choose to pick that particular portion. Because when you read the whole quote, you really get the whole gist of what Dr. Fink was saying, because he's actually tying the whole thing together, and the quote is just summarizing his whole statement. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you all again for allowing me the opportunity to come and stand before you again. Hopefully, I will be back next week and go and say something. Any questions, comments? Gracious Father, we thank you for all that you have allowed to have been done on this day. We thank you, Father God, for those who are here. We pray now, Father God, that you will continue to illumine our minds, our hearts, our souls, Father. Most important of all, we pray, oh Father God, that we will continue to yield ourselves to your Spirit, because we fully understand, oh Lord God, that without your Spirit we can do nothing, oh Father. We will continue to lead upon you, oh Father God. That we can be used as your lights and salt among the people of the world, oh Father God, those who don't know who you are. We ask all these blessings, oh Father, in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Thank you all. I do need to just make a comment. This was our first opportunity here to try to record